So if we're all reading the same Bible, eventually we're all going to come to the same conclusion? Nope! No, we're not going to come to the same conclusion, because we haven't. And look, sincerely, in my naivety, I used to believe that all of Christianity was the same. To be honest, from an outsider looking in, Christianity, all the different denominations, all the different church names, all the different buildings, I didn't think that they understood Christianity differently. I just thought they were, going on a willy, creating different buildings because it looks nice, or creating a different name because it looks nice, having a different logo because it looks nice. I still thought, you all believe the same thing, right? Because you read the same Bible. Guess what? People read themselves into the text. I've done this. Everybody does this unless they have something, a teaching authority, a magisterium, an infallible interpretation that binds them to that so they don't make that mistake. Why are there thousands of different Protestant denominations and they all claim the scriptures as their final authority, yet they've all defined them differently? If that starts happening, you could basically throw Sola Scriptura out the window. I know Protestants are commenting on my videos, you get Protestantism wrong, man. Sola Scriptura isn't just Bible alone. We still believe in traditions and some type of teaching authority. Okay, I get that, because you can't have Christianity without traditions, magisterium, teaching authority, and Bible. You just can't, unless you're really just sitting at home doing nothing but the Bible. I understand that, but you'll have a different teaching authority and you'll have a different way of tradition, and the source that you're going to establish those is the Bible alone. That's the Sola Scriptura phrase. Yet it hasn't worked out for you. Why is that? And really, there isn't actually a good argument on the Protestant side towards that. They will say, okay, well, we don't believe in what non-denominationals are doing, or Baptist or Pentecostal, like the mainline Protestants do not believe in symbolic communion and all that stuff, and they are actually much closer to Catholics than any other denomination. Also an Orthodox are much closer to Catholics, but they make this crucial mistake, is that they don't have one visible binding authority that creates a universal teaching. That's like, when I hear that, I'm just like, get me in that. I want to get straight in that universal church, especially 33 AD, you got Jesus, and then you got it 2026, still the same church. Some things have changed, but that's because life changes. I don't think that's an argument against the Catholic Church. And the issue is not how we are looking at Jesus himself. Protestants love Jesus. They take the word seriously. Catholics, Orthodox, and Protestants, we're all brothers and sisters in the faith. We all love each other. We all forgive each other. We all forgive each other for our trespasses. We all want to help each other, right? Most of us, cut in Ollie, no, and him, I rebuke the Catholic Church. But we all have to basically take our hats off and bow to the Catholic Church. Not in worship, we're not worshiping the Catholic Church, worshiping Jesus, but in honor. Because without the Catholic Church, we wouldn't have the Bible, we would have heresy way more big. Jesus established a church, he didn't establish a book. He did establish a book, but it wasn't him himself that did the book, it was the apostles interpreting him and reading it, writing it. And that's how we basically get that. But if it wasn't for the succession of the apostles, Peter laying hands on his bishop, the bishop laying hands on someone else, it getting further and further down until we're in 300 AD plus, to the point where then you get the Catholics actually canonizing the Bible. Before then, the authority was in the saints and in the apostles. If you had a question about the church, right, you did not know what basically the core of Christianity meant, you would send a letter to Paul or to Peter or to James, because they knew Jesus directly. To John, they knew Jesus directly. Well, the apostles are smart, okay? They didn't just think, okay, Jesus gave us everything we need to know to lock in our salvation for eternity with him, and we're going to do our best to spread the gospel. Let's just have a little round table and think about that. What should we do? What will happen when we die? Huh? What's going to happen when we die? If we don't spread the correct, proper teaching to individuals to carry that cross, so to speak, then people are going to get confused and heresy is going to start up, and people aren't going to get the actual meaning of what Christianity is. So what did they do? They appointed bishops, they had priests, the apostles themselves that knew Jesus did this, and they laid their hands on them, and they basically, the church was already there, but they ushered it forward because Peter was martyred, Paul was martyred, John dies, James dies. They're not stupid, okay? They didn't just leave it to that and then everybody was going to try and figure it out themselves without a Bible, without a book, without the scriptures, right? Like, think about it. And what ended up happening, like, you got that historic picture, right? Gnostics came. And what did the Gnostics try and teach? They were the New Agers, okay? The Gnostics tried to teach you that there was a hidden meaning to Jesus. That if you do not know this secret meaning to Jesus, then you do not understand him. You do not have salvation. You do not have that spiritual power or spiritual authority if you do not know this special, secret, occult meaning to Jesus. While this was threatening Christianity because the apostles died, okay? So normal, everyday Christians, you got to think about it. They're in fear and survival mode a lot of the time because they're being hunted. They're being persecuted. The Romans are killing them, all right? More than the Romans. Also, the Jews are killing their own kind. And the apostles died, so these Christians, it's a identity crisis, basically. You're trying to figure out what you believe. You didn't meet Jesus yourself. You didn't get to speak to the apostles that met Jesus themselves. Yet you know that Jesus is real. You know salvation is in him. Yet you don't have a Bible to read to understand everything. So what do? You're being hunted. You're going to be crucified. You're going to be burnt. You're going to be fed to lions. You don't have a Bible. You don't have the direct apostles. You don't have Jesus. And now you have Gnostics telling you that, hey, if you don't know that secret meaning, that hidden knowledge behind Jesus, then you're actually just getting it wrong. Basically calling Christians heretic. Well, again, the apostles are smart, okay? The apostles gave the authority to other apostles after they died. And what did those apostles do when Gnosticism came up? They used the word Catholic, universal, out in the open to bridge a unifying connection between all of the Christians so they could go visibly, as a visible member of the Catholic Church, to visibly bind themselves to the correct doctrines of what Christianity actually is, not the Gnosticism of the secret meaning. And by having that visible Catholic institution, they were able to get together. Now they're not in houses anymore. Soon as they can get into buildings, they did. Christianity grew. Catholicism grew because it's the same thing. And boom, you get it to the point where Roman Emperor's mom is Christian and he legalizes Christianity. Then you get the Bible. But there was a lot of time before that Bible. So the reformers, their heart was good to reform Christianity into all these different denominations. Well, that was not their intention, obviously. Martin Luther was excommunicated. He would have stayed in the Catholic Church if he could. But why would he stay in the Catholic Church if he could? Because it's the one true church. He got excommunicated for heresy though. Sorry, Martin Luther. Get out! But that's not to say that the heart of the Reformation was a bad thing, because it wasn't, okay? I agree with many of the 95 theses that Martin Luther wrote, okay? I agree with many Protestants in what they say, and actually a lot of Catholics do. So what is causing that dividing line? It's mainly the dogmas of the Catholic Church that people don't understand why they're there, and from the Protestant perspective, they can't actually fully see them. Even though they are in the Bible, they can't actually fully see the picture in the Bible because they're going off their own interpretation. And what's so crazy about that is because the mainline Protestants, like I said, look way more like Catholicism than the other Protestant denominations, like Baptist, Pentecostal, non-denominational. So you have this huge dividing line, and the dividing lines differ on the timeline, okay? Because you got Catholicism, then you got Orthodoxy. That's the first dividing line. But before that dividing line, there was tension before it happened. And then you got the Reformation, and you got the first dividing line, Martin Luther. But then Martin Luther and Zwingli disagree, and then there's that dividing line, and then there's another dividing line, and the Reformation just kick-started a bunch of dividing lines in Christianity. Because, well, it's a protesting of the Catholic Church, which the Catholicism from the early church was put in place by the apostles so that we didn't divide, right? That's why I'm Catholic. That's why I don't agree with the Reformation to the fullest, even though there are good things that happened in the Reformation. But all these little dividing lines, they sort of split out in multiple different directions, because you'll have Protestants that agree with Catholics on baptism, but then disagree on them about communion. But then you'll have Protestants that agree way more closely with the communion, but then maybe disagree with some of the Marian dogmas. You know, and I'm just like putting it out there, like those might not be 100% factual, but the way I'm seeing it is there's just after the Reformation, there's just all these different ways that you can actually choose yourself what you believe in and pick that. But the early Christians did not have that spiritual platter put in front of them of any denomination they can choose. I don't agree with this denomination, so I'm going to go to this church. I don't believe that, so I'm going to believe that at this church, right? And this spiritual platter, this spiritual buffet is getting people fat with choices and making them think that the Reformation was a good thing because now we got all these choices. But it's not simplifying or unifying Christians. It's doing the opposite. I'm pre-denominational, okay? That's what Catholicism is, or Orthodoxy. It's pre-denominational. We don't think that being able to pick any denomination you want is a good idea within Christianity. And on top of that, if you don't agree with one of the dogmas of the Catholic Church, and you don't want to submit yourself to that, you have to not just go off on your own emotions and think, I don't believe that, so I'm going to pick a different denomination. You have to really understand why you don't agree with that dogma and understand actually the historical backing of that dogma, because the Marian dogmas, those are the big ones, right? And people just look at facts at first glance and they see that Marian dogma is being defined in the 1800s. It's like, oh, the Catholics added that. Now you have to believe it if you're a Catholic. But that was added into the 1800s. But that's not actually the case. From the very beginning of the early church, these things within Christianity weren't questioned. But then after the Reformation, after the 1500s, then these things get questioned more. But before the 1500s, all the stuff about Mary was just a given. Christians believed it as just Christianity from 33 AD onwards. Of course, there were some people that disagreed, but just because you disagree with something doesn't mean it's not true. And the Catholics, I believe they have the fullness of the truth because they have way more historical continuity than any other denominations. Same with Orthodox. They have, Catholics and Orthodox, we're like this, okay? You Orthodox bros, you're on your way to claim that it's a mystery. Transubstantiation, Catholics use a word, but it's still a mystery. I don't understand that Orthodox thing. It's still a mystery, guys. Just because we use the word transubstantiation doesn't mean that we don't think it's a mystery. Anyway, but you go define your own doctrine, create your own church because you disagree with something. But just because you disagree with something doesn't mean it's not true. And the more historical continuity, backing, and being founded on Jesus Christ, I think it's closer to the truth. And again, this is not a salvation issue. If the specific interpretation of your theology starts to affect salvation, it can, but for a lot of Protestants, you're still putting your full faith in Jesus. And I do believe, yes, Catholics completely believe you have salvation. So it just really is about, your heart posture and how deep do you really want to go into the history? How deep do you really want to go into the church fathers? And how close do you really want to get to the original understanding, the context of worship in the Old Testament, how that is been continued in the context of Catholicism, and how close do you actually want to get to that early church interpretation, that early church understanding of things? Because for me, that's why Catholicism still is the best way to go. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I really just want to urge all of us Christians to come together regardless of whether we're disagreeing or debating. This channel is for honest exploration only. I'm not claiming to be a perfect teacher. YouTube is platforming my content and showing it to a lot of people, so definitely there is opportunities that can be used to plant seeds and teach, and that if that's God's will for my life, then I'm going to surrender to it. But I'm also going to just warn all of you guys, like, if you point something out, this channel is for honest exploration, okay? So I am not a perfect person. If I get something wrong, point it out. I am like on fire for just wanting to learn, and the way to do that, personally, the best way I do that is just speaking it out, having that open, like I don't have an AI script with me, or I'm not trying to get everything 100% perfect, because that AI intelligence isn't my intelligence. So if I really want something to stick in my intelligence, I have to rehearse it, I have to practice speaking it, and I have to put myself in front of a camera and get other people's opinions. Simple as that. But I'm not an apologist or a perfect teacher. But God bless you all, and see you on the next one.